Hello, community, and kind folks out there. Welcome to the channel RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ, and this week we are talking about plants. Plants, used at the tabletop RPG, location, whether it's like ficus or dandelions or no, actually, we're not talking about that. We are talking about tabletop RPGs, but we are talking about using plants as some of our ultimate adversaries and such. Now, yesterday, of course, on Monster Monday, we went through quite a potpourri, as it were, of hodgepodge, a literal cornucopia of ideas when using plants in our as NPCs, allies, and adversaries in our tabletop games. But sometimes we might want to know, like, even mechanically, like, how should we insert them? What ways can we modify them, make them better to fit into our games, and things of that nature. So I thought we would talk about that today. Now, Discord Tuesday, I've defaulted to using some mechanics, but usually it's like half mechanics and half basically a grab bag of a lot of ideas that we can use for the games as well. So one of the things I believe that we can do when it comes to plants is that, first of all, there are a ton of monster manual, monster, fiend folio-ish, Volo's Guide, whatever game system you're using that use lots of plants. They are a staple that goes way back to the beginnings of role playing. Yeah, even the white books and such, and the Earl Otis artwork and such. Just fungus and living plants and nearly Cthulhuoid, Lovecraftian styled plants and that existed in the world. Now, yesterday I brought up the idea of like reskinning, reflavoring, reusing some of the elements of things that already existed, like the classic troll, and just reskinning that as some kind of plant-like creature, making a creature more chlorophyllc in many ways, giving it like a green skin, maybe some leaves on its body, and describing it in that manner, as well as the fact that there's some really cool ideas in terms of making BFF creatures, little best friend creatures that happen to coincide with with the trees, like the fey creatures or elves or something like that. Now there are some animalistic creatures that might be in alignment with plants as well, considering that there's a lot of animals that used plant life, especially trees, as havens, and considering this is possibly fantasy, maybe even science fiction, to combine them together. For example, birds happen to make nests in trees and would probably have zero interest in wanting to harm a tree. I mean, it's neither usable for or against them. They would want to live in the tree, and maybe the tree doesn't really care about the birds, neither as allies or enemies. So it's possible to have yourself an individual an adversary who lives in the tree, such as, like, what are some cool birds, like bloodhawks or something like that, and then living in the tree with nests and those kind of things, and then on top of that, maybe like a treant or something. I'm using a classic treant, or Trent, or however you want to pronounce it. Yep. And in those scenarios, it's possible that the tree walks around and has a couple of nests of birds, and the birds happen to sit up in the branches, and the fact that the tree moves around doesn't really bother them. Same thing could happen. Yes. For those who are brand new or don't know, this show is simulcast on 3 platforms. Twitch, over there on Twitch, I would really love for you to follow me on Twitch. I'd love to become an affiliate and to which would allow me the opportunity to make this show better for you. Also, over on YouTube, you can join there and join the chat on either one of those. And over on the Discord for this channel, RPG with DBJ / Discord. You will see that information below the video on both Twitch and YouTube, and you can join on there. There is a boiler room. Love hanging around in a boiler room. I don't foresee in the near future us changing the name of it, but yes, you can join on in there. You can hear the audio. The audio is pumped out there, and of course, you can participate in the chat on the Discord as well. And if you're feeling a little randy, you can join in on all three. As a matter of fact. Anyway, now, yeah. Yep, it's the third link in the doobly-doo. Thank you there, Dead Man. I appreciate that. Yes, it is the third link in the doobly-doo. Oh, by the way, this past Sunday, there was an interview with JAL, Mr. Large. He is the founder of Red Dice Diaries. He himself, and I happened to interview him. Going through a process of using the Creators Conclave as a way to spotlight some individuals that I feel are excellent content creators, whether their numbers may not show how much impact they've had on me. So just something to for this individual. He's on YouTube. He's got a podcast on Anchor, blog, etc., etc. Now, getting back to this, along with like birds in the nests, maybe there are like, it would be pretty scary to see something like a big giant tree with like a flock of, I don't know, buzzards or ravens or something up in the tree, maybe even following along behind an old hag or two. And so you could combine the elements of plants and something else as well. Now, using them as allies and adversaries is pretty easy, right? They tend to be focused on, it's very easy to default to them to be focused on their survival, and there's nothing wrong with using that motivation, whether there are two enemy nations hacking down the forest to use for goods and services, or to support a war effort or something, and the plants live in the middle, and it's like, hey, if you're for the armies hacking us down, you're our enemy. If you're against them, you're our friend. I mean, pretty simple, really, to do. And making them the pawns or the servants of a particular class. For example, they could be in service to or loyal to, in league with, say, fey creatures, or the plants themselves may be the brilliant and intelligent beings that they are in your game, and make them, especially if you're unfamiliar with some, or you would like to have like a big bad as a plant-like being. Pretty easy to reskin a lot of things, right? I mean, first of all, any and every creature, it probably behooves you to change their creature type. You can just make it a plant. There's already an example of this. For example, there is the yellow musk creeper. If you guys aren't familiar with the yellow musk creeper, it is a plant that spits out spores that basically kills you, and the spores turn you into a zombie. It's like an undead version of a zombie, except it's not necrotic. It is plant-based. Now, the purpose is that the zombies go out. They have, like, I'm just picturing like a yellow crust around their mouth and eyes. Their eyes all milky white as they try to attack people in where, very close to where the yellow musk plant is. They drag back the unconscious or trapped or dead. They bring it back to the yellow musk creeper, and then along with some of the dead bodies, it tries to reanimate them or convert them over into more zombies, etc., etc. The same could be done for any number of effects or creatures or anything, and just make them plant-based instead of, say, necrotic-based, or, I don't know, outer world-based or something. Like, for example, a vampire makes a pretty good reskinnable creature that can be used that's plant-like. For example, vampires tend to be vulnerable to fire. Plants are the same way. Vampires drain blood. I could see a plant doing that as well through their roots or spines or thorns or something of that nature. Some vampires can turn into mist. You could reskin that as a plant turning into, a pile of leaves or pollen that blows through the air. Plant. Some vampires have control over like wolves or bats or rats or something. Picking a woodland or appropriately styled creature in the woods. Thank you, Christy, for coming in. I know it's been a little while, but I'm glad that you're able to take part, and I know you're a world hopper. I hope things are working out for you. Just as a side note, this show is not about it's not about current events, but I understand that there are many current events. So if you guys are stuck home, yeah, there you go. Thank you, Dead Man, for the yellow musk creeper pop in. If many of you are stuck at home and you want some long form content and even interact live or something, do that over here, or even suggest that to other people who are like, man, I sure would like a daily RPG show. And I'm like, oh, I'm right here. There he goes, right here. All right. Anyway, but just as a side note, I hope many of you are dealing with the current events in a reasonable and logical fashion. I hope you have plenty of toilet paper, lots of canned goods, and at least 3 subscriptions to some streaming services. Anyway, getting back to it, yeah, the yellow musk creeper. Yellow musk creepers were unholy vines whose flowers resembled orchids. These flowers were able to expel a musk that attracted prey. That's from the link that Dead Man put in. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, the yellow musk creeper is an example of how to, for me, is an example of. Oh yeah, thank you very much, Dead Man. Puts in a 24-hour link to the Discord. Might have to change the permissions on that as well. The yellow musk creeper is an example of how to, for me, it's like, here's the foundation of how to change one thing into another. Having this plant have parallel dangers to other things that are in the world, I think makes a lot of sense. Like, for example, yeah, Day of the Triffids. Yeah, it's pretty bad. As a matter of fact, not to make this too topical, but the idea of plants having the ability to spread something like an infestation, or the plants themselves have been infested by, say, some kind of insects, or could be in harmony with insects. I suppose a tree or some other plant-like creature could have a hive, like an insect hive in it. But I suppose just as easily it could be devoured by, I don't know, centipedes or caterpillars, or be infested with some kind of disease which might make the plants, which are normally docile and hanging in their own world, bump up against humanity and become far more violent and more insidious and such. Especially if you have like a woodland area that's somehow being infested by some kind of disease or curse or some kind of affliction or something like that. As well as the fact that we know in our own life, even as kids, remember those plants that you shouldn't rub on, touch or rub on your body. There are allergic reactions to certain things. I know a kid that went into the hospital by being dared to rub either poison ivy or what's the other, poison oak or something on his personables. Pretty nasty. Yeah, comment from the wiki says the Trifid is a fictional, tall, mobile, carnivorous plant species created by John Wyndham in his 1951 novel, The Day of the Triffids. I did not know that. I thought it was a regular plant. A triffid. I'm pronouncing it trifid because I think it sounds better. Oh, pigweed. Okay, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I'm sorry. Since adapted for television, film and television, the word trifid has become a common reference in British English to describe large, invasive, or menacing-looking plants. I did not know that. Maybe not menacing, but there are in like invasive species here, especially in the south, called kudzu, which is a which was a plant that was imported here to the states, which is similar, but I don't believe we have a like a carnivorous plant slang-ish term for use for that. Although, Venus flytraps kind of come to mind, or what's the movie with I was about to say Sigmund, the big old plant that's being fed has to be fed blood, and starts to get hungrier and hungrier. Sith Visug, Tesla Ranger from Pathfinder. Sith Visug, Little Shop of Horrors. Thank you so much. Yeah. Little Shop of Horrors. You want an example of a real man-eating, plant that could swallow people whole? Pretty good rendition in that movie. I think, I was it the Jim Henson group that animated that plant. It's pretty cool. Sith, pronounced Sith Visug, is the demon lord of fungus and parasites. Originally a Quillpoth lord, he is older than any of the demons now residing in the abyss. As a matter of fact, the Dungeon Cast just released a long dissertation on Zeitmoit, Zugmoit, another moss fungus like demon lord or what have you. Yeah, pretty nasty. And not too many people are into living invasive, mobile and sentient fungus, but yeah, pretty nasty. Fungus and other kinds of like moss and things. That's why a lot of times plants and oozes are kind of like combined together in terms of the plants and oozes, and fungus tends to be very primordial. It tends to have a it is thought of as to be something that is its base portions of nature, along with the classic four elements: earth, air, fire, and water. Plant seems to be right up there with it, in terms of having a direct correlation with something that is very, very old and ancient and primordial. So I wouldn't put it past anyone to want to combine the idea that a dark wood area. And thank you, Christy, as well, for the Shop of Horrors, Little Shop of Horrors movie reference. The combining the idea of these demon lords and a dangerous woodland area kind of fits together. Now, having plants that move around quite a bit, I mean, it's, of course, we all know in our own world that plants tend to be sedentary, but having them be brilliant and move around and such, I think, unless you want to add say, reskin maybe a racial type in the world as a plant-like being, I'm sure you could very easily pick a genasi or a dragonborn or a tiefling or something and just reskin some of the capabilities. Right off the top of my head, you could very easily reskin, say, a dragonborn as a plant-like race in your world by making it, particularly immune or resistant to certain things, and maybe being able to spew out spines or some kind of like pollen or whatever. You get my point. Maybe even changing the way it feeds. Maybe doesn't require much food, but requires like twice as much water. Maybe I could see something something like that. Reskinning and reflavoring it, whatever. Anyway, for some other mechanical bits, you may need to, as a game master, dungeon master, you may need to think about the fact that plants are, basically different than they operate in a different realm than, say, regular humanity with lungs and hearts and things like that. So whether a say an NPC or a player character can, say, breathe underwater, or is able to navigate in, say, a fog shrouded room, or has dark vision, or is particularly susceptible to fire, or whether edged weapons are maybe not more effective, but are able, for the player characters want to eliminate some of the more dangerous limbs of said creature. Maybe it's possible that they're able to use that old battle axe and hack off a couple of limbs or three. And adjudicating that on the fly might be necessary, considering that, say, for example, in Dungeons and Dragons, there's never really been a rule on whether you could hack off someone's limbs, but it makes a lot of sense for, like, a plant, especially a multi-limbed plant. The movie version of Little Shop of Horrors was directed by Frank Oz, and Audrey II was designed by Lyle Conway. Okay, Frank. Okay, yeah. I'm sure you can find a clip or 1,000 on YouTube and see what that looks like. Also, coming up with, like, why would a plant want to perform certain types of horrors? Pretty easy to find some motivations, such as people cutting down the woodland areas where they live. If it is a woodland area, there's lots of ways to make aquatic plants as well, being either allies with other aquatic creatures, or creatures or villagers that live in subterranean locations. Maybe there is maybe there's a curse that must be lifted that's turning the woodland area against the PCs. And I say woodland as a catch-all for anything such as, like, swamps or rainforests or jungles or just a plain old forest, or even some other areas. I'm trying to think of some other areas that would be particularly filled with plant life, but I'm not thinking of it right now. Maybe an oasis in a desert would count as well, I suppose. But anyway, and of course, fungoid caverns down in the Underdark. The Underdark is a trademarked term, so whatever you call it in your world, or you plan on designing some kind of under subterranean realm, having plant life down there as well really counts. But having them intelligent and mobile could be as simple as a druidic circle has educated them by choice or just by accident. Maybe there is a druidic circle that wants to uplift the plant life to become sentient, and feels like it should have an equal say in how humanity goes about its ways. Or maybe it's just by accident. Maybe a druid goes out into the woods and sees what kind of damage was done by, I don't know, some kind of goblinoid army, and goes to seek to use its abilities to heal the woods, and maybe one or more of them come alive, or have been sitting back waiting for the proper time to speak to humanity at the time, and then maybe now that they have an ally in their fight against humanity, this might be a thing. Now, it's also possible for, say, refugees of some sort have gone out into the woods and have allied themselves with the plants and such. For example, there might be beware of the infant trees and those ambushes. It's possible that that infant trees, yeah, because there might be the parents might be around. Now, it's also possible there might be some local, much like I'm a proponent of exploration, wildlife and woodland areas make a great way for you guys to incorporate some of the more scientific and or fairy tale methods to appease or maneuver around or avoid the hazards that a living woodland would have. For example, maybe there is some kind of like incense or maybe just plain old smoke that those that are familiar with the different ways to survive in these dark woods, maybe there's like a torch, and if you light the torch or a chalice with certain types of incense, that the dangerous vines will part away from you for fear of being burned, and so there is safe passage through or relative safety passing through a particular area as long as you're using the torch to kind of like use the fire or the smoke to keep the living vines away from you. And that might be a way for that might be how, I don't know, the bandit group is able to attack travelers and then run out into the woods and are never found again because they're able to use this method to navigate through how thick the woodlands are. You may also want to modify the rules on how dense a woodland area is. Like, yes, I'm completely aware of what difficult terrain is, but there are spell-like abilities that, instead of every 2 feet of every foot of movement costing 2 feet, there is a way, there are spell effects that make it so difficult that it costs 4 feet of movement for every foot of movement to go through. So maybe, just maybe, unlike the spell effects, maybe there are natural barriers to move through a particular area. Like, for example, something could be so dense that it requires machetes to get through it, and the PCs may have to have a choice. Like, okay, do we go around it? It might take us longer, but we still aren't. We can still move, or we might want to go through the extremely dense foliage, which is costing us 3, 4, 5 feet of movement for every movement we go through, unless we're using like edged weapons to hack and slash our way through the foliage. It might even have some other, it might even hide other dangers in there, or maybe running through the woods is very dangerous. Want to prevent those slips, trips, and falls, that kind of thing. Yeah, Dead Man. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I knew that. Dead Man says it appears that the Underdark is not trademarked by WotC. I believe if you look into the OGL, I believe there is that you're unable to use it. I'm pretty sure because as I'm writing the Subterranean book, I realized that I found it. Alex and I. Let's see. 2000 AD Tales of Telguth. A mage's apprentice is sent by his master to ask a neighboring mage for supplies. But on his way there comes across a field of human heads crying for help, which the other mage harvests for food. The apprentice refuses to believe his words, that it is a sentient plant that takes on human appearance to lure in victims, and tries to free one of the female heads before he gets eaten. His skin is then recycled by the plant to form a new head. There was nasty in the expedition to the Barrier Peaks. In that module that incorporated, I'm not sure if you guys remember this image. There's an image of a tree stump with a little small rabbit on top of it, and the rabbit looks all cute and is like, oh. As a matter of fact, this image was actually redrawn for Pathfinder, where you get to see it from the other end, because in the expedition to the Barrier Peaks, they have two images of it. One is a tree stump with a little soft rabbit on top, and then there's another one where you see that the rabbit is just is just the lure for the tree stump as the big maw, the tree stump opens up, and then the roots and vines connected to the tree stump rip out of the ground because by the time you go up to pet the little rabbit, you are within the circle of the grappling roots and vines that will pull you into its maw. Yeah. Not sure if it's trademarked, but the fact that Underdark is capitalized may even belong to I think Forgotten Realms, which belongs to R.A. Salvatore, who's used it. Who, in terms that may belong to who created Forgotten Realms. I can't remember. I was about to say Kenneth Haidt, but whatever. Yeah, the fact that it's uppercased means that it's a proper name, and you don't want to use proper names. There's a ton of there's a ton of names in the OGL. It's like Displacer Beast. You can't use Beholder. You can't use Mind Flayer. Can't use many of the proper names for some of the demons during a period of time when they renamed a lot of the demons. Yeah, it's a thing. You got to be careful of that when producing materials for sale when it comes to using 5th edition. That would be that. I guess I could do it do my own experiences with that. Yeah, because it's a little more complicated than you would think. Yeah, there's a difference between the OGL and the SRD. Although they're linked together. It's weird. Okay, so plants and mechanically speaking, you can use plants as both like creatures, typical stat block, whatever. Maybe pick a bunch that you want to reskin or reflavor. You can also use them as obstacles in your world. Nothing wrong with, say, living vines and trees walking around, with also the a hazard of walking into or across or stumbling into a field of like living plants or a field of pollen that spews something out. Whatever the case may be. I mean, you could even reskin what's something cool like a stone giant and instead make it like some kind of like large humanoid plant or something that's able to throw you know, seeds or something from that it has growing off of its own branches or whatnot. I mean, it's pretty easy to, not easy, but if you file off the serial numbers, I think you can come up with some really great ideas. Now, I think one issue with plants is that it may feel like they don't have the evil, like that desire for power that you would find with some, like a lich or an undead, a necromancer or something from the nether realms or whatnot. But if the origins of these plant creatures are related to humanity, I could see that being a thing, right? For example, yeah, I could see that being a thing where maybe someone has died and their body was buried in the ground, and then some kind of part of their essence has grown into the plants and whatnot. I could even see this being part of like a lich from a dark druidic circle or a broken druid circle, I guess, a broken circle, where their abilities are far more plant based. Yeah. Deadman says something awful has a link to a review of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks with the pick of the rabbit on the stump as the main image. As a matter of fact, on my own channel, I have a review that still to this day gets reviews. I think the video is like 3 years old, 4 maybe, of my review of Expedition to the Barrier Peaks. It's not a very good review, but it's up there anyway. Yep. Module S3. Yep, Steve and Zach discover that UFOs have crash landed in a D&D module with no ending. Yeah, Expedition to the Barrier Peaks introduced science fiction, which has always been part of science fantasy, has always been linked together. It wasn't until recently that we started separating the two, as well as the fact that yeah, the module is a sandbox that doesn't have Um, it kind of has an ending. It kind of does. Honestly, it's just it when you, if you ever see the module, you'll understand when you see there's a black and white image, I believe, drawn by Jeff Dees or something. Pretty sure it was drawn by Jeff Dees. Anyway, it's pretty cool. It has to deal with oh, I don't know, grenades and laser weapons and mind flares. Yeah. Pakaha says when a body decomposes in the wilderness, it creates what's known as a fairy ring. It's a ring of mushrooms surrounding the site of the body. Ooh, makes perfect sense for you know, taking something of that nature. Maybe by accident, people have been infested with something that go out to a woodland area and they die, or the woodland area has some kind of like vague arcane miasma in it, and people that have died out there, the decomposition ring of mushrooms, as you say, their pack is become sentient, or or maybe some of the plant life has been finding victims to drag out to the woods for the purpose of having them decompose, either feeding their roots maybe, or hoping to replenish their army of sentience. Like for example, maybe by attacking, like if they find a wizard and drag the wizard out to the woods, and the wizard's decomposing body goes, you know, gets decomposed and goes down into the ground, maybe the plant-like creatures are able to siphon some of the wizard's knowledge and arcane ability. That might be something. Ah, something awful posted their review in 2009. Well, of course somebody got. It's not a review fight. I'm sure I got there probably 2016 or 17 maybe. But I guarantee you there's reviews of just about every Dungeons and Dragons classic module. Yeah, so for those who absolutely positively hate science fiction in their Dungeons and Dragons and claims that it was never there, you are wrong. The Barrier Peaks, as a matter of fact, the Barrier Peaks are the most eastern portion of what is known as the Dark Sun area. If you ever see a map of Greyhawk, the Barrier Peaks are in the western or southwestern portion of the map, and then there is a vast desert on the other side of those mountains, and that is where they eventually decided to build to build Dark Sun, the setting Dark Sun, which didn't exist at the time when Greyhawk was new. Yeah, a little bit of a useless trivia there, but those of us that are old and grognardian, we know what that was about. As a matter of fact, there is even another module that goes through those same mountains. All that glitters. I don't know the letter number signifier, but it's called All That Glitters. It's basically a subway, an arcane subway that goes through the mountain range to get from one side to the other. And I think it's like a first through third level adventure, or maybe second through fifth or whatever. So yeah, look that one up too. I don't own it, but and it was at a time when TSR was allowing British writers to is it UK6? Yep, that was when they had a overseas writers doing writing adventures and such, and a lot of them were award winning at the time. Ah, there you go, Tesla. Dead Man, yep, All That Glitters module. Yeah, in 1984, and I think it still holds up today. I think it still holds up. Levels 5 through 7. Ah, oh, so wrong. Yeah, and you kind of need like 5 to 8 players. And I remember you needing to have like an expedition to find this broken arcane subway or something. But I digress. Although, well, it's 1984. I mean, if I suppose I could give away some of the spoilers. Maybe not. Okay, I won't do that. But yeah, the idea that there's a connection between the people that have died and the plants, I think makes a pretty compelling story, especially if the plants still remember or have a vague reference to the people that they were with, meaning like maybe they're people have gone, the classic village people have disappeared, and now those people are now walking around with, there's plants walking around with their faces, or these people are walking back into the village, but there's like moss or something growing on their skin, and they seem like plants or something. I mean, that's a possibility as well. Um, Also, that maybe there's a cover up. A good story idea might be that there are a clan of, I don't know, maybe knights wouldn't say this, but maybe rangers or something to hack down the woods. Christy ran head to sleep time. Yeah, late gators. Christy, have a great one, and I'm glad this old dude is able to entertain you youngins. So have a great one, and you're always invited. I'll always be here. Whatever. Anyway, maybe like maybe something as simple as a murder happened out in the woods, but the plants remember, or maybe the person was killed out in the woods, and now they've reanimated, and the murderer is feeling guilty and is trying to cover it up and trying to rouse everybody, get a mob together to burn down the woods or hack down the trees or what have you. I think that's a pretty classic, murderer haunted by the person that murdered, haunted by the murder victim would be pretty cool. Also, although druids are inexorably linked to plants, doesn't mean that you can't have other character types. I'm sure warlocks fit in pretty good to have a plant based patron, or a wizard or an alchemist or something like that, have reskinning, reflavoring. As a matter of fact, there's also a paladin's order that is related to the natural order of plants and things. So I'm pretty sure you could reskin damn near any class related into the woods or something. I could see a bard being reskinned as like a Tarzan styled creature, Tarzan styled class. Of course, you don't have to just wear. I mean, a barbarian would fit in there, but you don't have to just wear the loincloth. But my point being that unlike the classic fantasy bard that plays a stringed instrument or a flute or something of that nature, maybe they are able to, instead of songs, mimic the sounds that they find out in nature, or maybe more tribalistic in terms of using drums. Flutes still blend into that. There are throat singers using those long I don't know what they're called. I'm going to butcher it. Long tubes, and using heavy breath from their diaphragm and their throat to make these haunting bass like sounds, or even I don't want to call them indigenous peoples in Australia using bull roarers, spinning the bull roarers to make certain sounds to send messages and things. So again, having some kind of relationship to the natural world and plants and things, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think I could even imagine. I mean, of course, there's also the idea didgeridoo. Is that what it's called? The didgeridoo, the extremely long, longer than a man can stand, and using like the I can't do that with my voice. That's embarrassing. Oh man. Pakaha says, we once had an insane older woman who was obsessed with having the most immaculate garden and would cast various spells to grow plants very quickly. Doesn't necessarily have to be a class. Exactly. I mean, I guess I was referring to player character options, but as far as like adversaries in your world, you don't need to have a class. You could just call this person. I mean, you could make up any stats you want, but if you want to snatch a stat block, hags fit perfectly into that realm. Like I said, vampires fit into that region. The I love the human headed beings because they remind me of like very good mid level creatures like a naga, sphinx, manticore, harpy. Like reskinning, reflavoring them as well. You could just make up someone. Of course, you could just throw some stats together and make up someone that is able to create for themselves an army, a loyal army of plant based adversaries. And again, remember, this doesn't need to be out into the wilderness. Having a garden, I love the idea of a garden. Having a garden, maybe this gardener has been supplying the community with salves and remedies for a very long time, and so maybe the personality is a little bit off kilter, but they're value added to the community until something goes wrong. Maybe the gardener gets robbed or is attacked, or someone tries to burn down the greenhouse or whatnot. Anything like that, and then maybe something happens to cause this, great anger to come out of this individual, and they let loose their army of loyal plants. Or maybe the gardener is injured and the plants take umbrage to like, oh hell no, let me open up that can of whoop ass and ravage this town to the ground. Sims? Okay. Tesla says The Sims, the cow plant, introduced an expansion pack for The Sims 2 and returning in The Sims 3 is exactly what it sounds like. Okay. However, instead of eating grass, it sometimes lures Sims close with the cake-shaped tip of its tongue. Cake-shaped Cake-shaped is an understatement. It's shaped like a slice of birthday cake complete with a lit candle and eats them. You know what? It's listen, I understand that there are things in nature that have a thing attached to them that is a lure, right? It's the idea of the big mauled monster that has the lure that dangles off of his forehead with a little light that draws in small fish or something. But um Gaxian creatures have been well known to do that kind of thing, like like I don't know, the rabbit on the stump idea, or birthday cake with a lit candle is sitting out there hiding, waiting for somebody to go grab the cake, and then you get pulled in. The idea of it was brought up yesterday. The the beautiful, attractive being that sleeps inside of the frond of a flower, but really, it's it doesn't have an independent intelligence. It's just designed to like reach out towards others to lure it into its body or something like that. Though that's sometimes you kind of hell even not a doppelganger, the mimic, right? It's like, I don't know how realistic this would be in a fantasy world, but it sure is fun. Anyway, goes on to say this causes his udder to fill with milk, which the plant's owner can drink. Disturbingly enough, this milk serves as an extra potent version of the elixir of life, which makes the sim that drinks it younger. Uh, this is this is a cycle that just is disturbing, and I love it because I hate it because I love it. Oh man. Sims can live indefinitely if you let the cow plant eat a steady stream of random passersby. Also, the Sim gets a memory of drank victim. Some Sims really want to drink their enemy's life essence. Ooh, but I like it. Didgeridoo is a wind instrument, and Dead Man puts in an image of that. Cool. The didgeridoo was developed by Aboriginal peoples of northern Australia, likely within the last 1,000 years. It is now in use around the world. Yep, the name for the it moved on me. The name of the Yolngu instrument is the Yadaki, or more recently by some, um, Mandapu or Mandapu in western Arnheimland. It is known as a Mago or Mago. Mm-mm-mm. There it is. The character for yesterday was named Leica. Leica is from the Lex movies. Yes, um, from the Lex wiki. Leica is an extra-dimensional carnivorous plant creature that can take on a human appearance. There are three versions of the character Leica. The first is a human girl whom Stanley had a crush on, I'm sure, and the what do I want to say? The enchantment of plants is a very common trope, right? The the idea that someone smells a certain fragrance and is drawn in, or that a particular shapely being. I mean, come on now, fey creatures, dryads. You know, the classic the classic guys drawn in by the beautiful female. Of course, we're not limited by that. They could be any player that plays in your game could have a very attractive and significant being created to draw in what is both enticing and sexually arousing for that particular player character, right? Of any type. So perfectly fits in. As a matter of fact, I could even see reskinning or reflavoring a Medusa or the Gorgon. Well, okay, the mythological Gorgons, the D&D Medusa, could very easily be reskinned as well, considering that, you know, the poison snakes on its head do not need to be snakes. Although it could be very poisonous, whether they are long vines that simply by caressing your skin, that, you know, nasty pus-filled bumps and an allergic reaction happens to the individual as they go into some kind of anaphylactic shock or something by being touched. The poison could be changed to like blindness, paralysis, muteness by making the throat enlarge or something like that. Maybe the throat enlarges and you can't speak, and your hands swell up so you can't use those fine manipulation or somatic components for spells, or maybe just a whole hell of a lot of disadvantage, right? Capital D disadvantage in that. I could see something like that. And oh, of course, instead of turning to stone, you turn into a plant. Easy enough to reskin something like that. Why not? Why the hell not? Why the hell not? Now, as far as like as I mentioned before the other day, you know, if you want to really reward your players for going into the dark woods and finding things, you know, instead of the classic magic sword, they could find like the idea of a shillelagh, like a tree branch that has magic all its own. I suppose the dwarves from The Hobbit, the one dwarf, Oakenshield, that picked up basically the oak shield. Yeah, oh, Tesla. Like, so instead of statues surrounding Medusa's lair, you have topiaries. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, topiary garden. Absolutely. Of course, they're like, wow, these topiaries are really intricate. That's pretty interesting. As a matter of fact, what is the movie? There's a movie where people were turned into topiaries. Um, the movie had, I'm not going to remember. It doesn't matter. The movie involved these women that were scientists that went in with guns to find their significant others through a weird scintillating barrier, and each of them, after going through the scintillating barrier, there was some kind of like subconscious effect that was happening to the people there, and one of them was very much wanted to protect the environment, and she was affected by it in many ways. Yeah, having now not only do the people turn into topiaries, having them come to life, or trying to find a way to bring them back from being turned into a plant. Now I know, there's a flesh to stone spell and a stone to flesh, but I suppose you could have a, plant to flesh, flesh to plant spell, or a version thereof, or needing to find a way to release them. If you're going to reskin a Medusa. Maybe you're going to reskin the fact that this Medusoid creature wants to be surrounded by the most beautiful things, and convince her to change them back into humanoids, human meat and flesh and bone or something. Would be pretty cool. As a matter of fact, I think it runs along the same storyline as like a Poison Ivy from the comic book character, where this person feels a stronger relationship to their plants in their garden than the human beings that like to pick with them, because they are just really bizarre. Deadman says, I believe there is a spell like that in second edition. I don't remember it, but I wouldn't put it past second, even third edition. I'm sure it would have something like that. 3X, But yeah, throwing something like that in the game, why the hell not? I always considered the spells in Dungeons and Dragons to be the rote spells, right? Like, basically there's an infinite number of spells. The ones in the book are the ones that everyone is familiar with, but the world is always filled with plenty of other spell-like effects in the world, and variations thereof, and you just have to learn them, right? Like for example, there's other magic missiles that have poison or fire or do thunder damage or something like that, electrical damage or whatever, and it's just necessary for you to find out those spells and learn them, because they're like one-offs. Much like a player wizard, or even a druidic player going off into the woods to study and come up with their own variations of said things. So yeah. Anyway, yeah, today was more of a grab bag. Wasn't really very mechanical, was it? But having the ability the idea from your players to maybe reskin some of their spell effects. Deadman says the Tome of Magic had rules stating that the players could make their own custom effects for spells. And I'm a huge proponent of that. If someone tells me that they want to change something for their pyromancer, and and say, well, I want to change the shield spell, but I want it to be like pyromantic and allow it to be resistant to fire effects instead of just a regular shield spell or something like that. Would I allow that? Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Why not? Why not allow them to do that? Anyway, guys, we're coming to the hour mark. I really appreciate you guys coming here. Again, join in on Twitch. This show's also simulcast on YouTube. And join the Discord server for RPG with DBJ. If you prefer long-term content, or you're someone who's stuck at home and you're like, maybe I should take part in some long-form content, believe you me, this show happens an hour each day, Monday through Friday. Please join us then. Maybe it might be too much content for you to absorb, which is quite all right. Sit back with some breakfast, get yourself a toaster pastry before you turn on your Netflix and whatnot, or maybe you're reconsidering turning on some of those talk shows or soap operas or something. Tune in here. And you know what? If you're unable to sleep, tune in as well. You can be lulled into a state of dreamlike ecstasy with the dulcet tones of my voice. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for spending your time here as well. Located below the video, please visit Red Dice Diaries. Tune in for a lot of the content over there that my friend and content creator has helped design a very immersive experience with a YouTube channel and podcast and a blog and such. So do that. And lastly, follow over on Twitch. I'd love to become an affiliate if you want to support the channel in that way as well. Anyway, guys, have a great day. I will see you tomorrow. World Building Wednesday. Thank you.